Chapter 1. Ash and Silence. The forest was too quiet. Not the quiet of peace, but of aftermath. The kind that settled like dust after fire, heavy, lingering, and suffocating. Saloon's boots sank into scorched earth as she stepped through what remained of the clearing, her eyes scanning the perimeter out of habit rather than concern. The smoke was long gone, but the memory of it still clung to the air. Her patrol partner, Garrett, moved a few paces ahead. He was young, eager, always ready with a question, still too green to know that the worst things were usually over before you even arrived. He slowed, frowning, as a collapsed structure came into view ahead. "Looks like a cabin," he said over his shoulder. Or was. Saloon didn't respond. She'd already recognized it. What remained of the building sat hunched beneath the overcast sky, its roof collapsed inward, beams blackened and broken. A chimney jutted out from the wreckage like a jagged tooth. Around them, the silence deepened. No birds, no wind, just the sound of boots crunching over ash. She stopped walking. Garrett glanced back, sensing something. "Captain?" Saloon said nothing. Her gaze was fixed on the ruin, eyes narrowing just slightly. She knew this place. Every scorched stone, every warped board, the layout etched into memory. Garrett stepped forward, picking through the debris. He crouched near what might have once been a table, brushing aside a piece of charred cloth and carefully pulling something from the ash. "Found something," he muttered. A moment later, he turned toward her, holding it out. A painting. The frame was half burned, edges curled from heat, but the center remained largely intact. Brushstrokes roughened by smoke and time, yet unmistakably deliberate. It was her. Not a heroic scene, not a battlefield or throne, just her, seated in soft light, her silver hair cascading over one shoulder, her expression unguarded, even gentle. It wasn't the kind of image anyone would have commissioned. It was the kind someone painted to remember, to keep. Garrett blinked. "Wait, this is you." He looked between the portrait and the woman before him. "You knew who lived here?" Saloon didn't move. Her voice, when it came, was cool and even. "I did." She walked forward, eyes never leaving the painting. She didn't reach out, didn't touch it. She didn't have to. Her boots scraped gently against ash-strewn wood as she stepped inside the ruin, movement precise, mechanical, like muscle memory from a life she no longer lived. Around her, the skeleton of the cabin loomed, half swallowed by time and fire. She passed the hearth without looking at it. She didn't need to. There, near the wall, a shape, curled, blackened, silent, a body. She stopped. No gasp, no sound, no way to be certain, not yet. Garrett's voice broke through the haze. "Captain, should we—" "Check the perimeter," Saloon said, her tone flat. "I need a moment." He hesitated, then nodded and turned away. Saloon stood there in the ruin, alone. The wind stirred again, just enough to move the ash at her feet, and with it came the first pull of memory, quiet, relentless. Chapter 2. Ash and firelight. The sky was too bright. Saloon blinked against the sun's glare, her vision swimming in and out of focus. Every breath dragged through her chest like broken glass. Her limbs felt far away, weightless, numb. Her armor was cracked, torn at the seams. Blood had dried in streaks down her thigh, across her ribs. She wasn't sure how long she'd been lying there in the field, just that the dragon was dead and her party wasn't coming back. So this is how it ends. A soldier's death, alone, far from home. No bards, no graves, just scorched grass and silence. She closed her eyes. Footsteps, not imagined, not hers. Saloon's hand twitched toward the hilt of her sword, only to find it gone. She tensed, sharp pain flaring down her side. Her heart pounded once, then again, then a shadow fell across her face. "Whoa, whoa, easy now." A voice, male, unfamiliar, gentle. "You look like you pissed off the wrong lizard." She forced her eyes open. A man crouched beside her, face backlit by sunlight. Brown hair tied messily back, stubble on his jaw, a faint scar on one cheek. He wore simple leathers, no crest, no armor. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. Saloon tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. He didn't wait. His hands moved quickly, checking her wounds with practiced efficiency. He winced at the gash on her side. "Damn, you're lucky it didn't go deeper." He glanced down, his brow furrowed. "And there, gods, how are you still conscious?" Saloon followed his gaze, barely, and saw the torn fabric along her inner thigh. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped. "You've got a bad one here," he muttered, already pulling a satchel from his side. "You could have nicked an artery. I need to treat this now." Saloon grimaced, summoning enough strength to glare. "Don't touch me." "Well, that's a problem," he replied calmly, setting the satchel beside her, "because you'll bleed out in 20 minutes unless I do." She opened her mouth to protest again, but his tone had changed. No teasing now, just firm, focused urgency. "Please," he said, "let me help." Her vision blurred again, the pain too sharp to fight. Pride wrestled with survival, then, grudgingly, gave way. She nodded. The man exhaled, visibly relieved, but instead of tending to the wound right there in the field, he looked around, scanning the tree line. "We shouldn't do this out here," he said. "It's not safe, and you need heat, shelter. Come on." Saloon blinked at him, confused. "I can't walk." He didn't argue, he just moved to her side and slid an arm beneath her shoulders. "Then I'll carry you." "Don't you dare." But he was already lifting her, carefully but without hesitation. Saloon hissed through her teeth, her ribs flaring with pain. Her arms instinctively tightened around his neck to keep from falling, her pride boiling behind her eyes. "You're enjoying this," she muttered, breathless. "A little," he admitted with a grin, "but mostly I'd rather you not bleed out on my boots. They're new." The world tilted as he started walking, the forest blurring past in shaky flashes. Saloon tried not to notice how steady his heartbeat was beneath her ear, or how warm he felt despite the chill. She hated how heavy her limbs felt in his arms, how helpless. She hated needing help at all. They reached the cabin 10 minutes later. It was small, tucked between a grove of leaning pines, the kind of place that belonged to someone who meant to stay hidden. The walls were hand-hewn logs, moss creeping between the cracks, smoke still curled from the chimney. He shouldered open the door and carried her inside, lowering her gently onto a low bench near the fireplace. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. The moment he stepped back, Saloon tried to sit upright, only to falter again. She braced her arm against the wall, teeth gritted. "I can manage," she growled. He raised both hands in mock surrender. "Sure you can. Let me know when you pass out so I can catch you again." He turned toward a shelf, rummaging through jars and cloth bundles while she took in her surroundings. Simple, clean hunting gear near the door. A bow hung from the wall. No banners, no signs of allegiance. Just tools, food, warmth, and a painting in progress, propped on an easel near the far window, a sketch of trees and a river. The line work was surprisingly delicate. Saloon blinked, not what she expected from a man who just tossed her over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. He returned with a bowl of warm water and a bundle of cloth. His tone had shifted again, calmer now, more serious. "I need to clean the wound before I stitch it." He crouched beside her, pausing only briefly before asking, quieter now, "Do I have your permission?" Saloon hesitated. Her heart beat a little too loudly in her chest. She glanced down at the gash on her thigh, hidden beneath torn cloth and crusted blood, a deeply personal wound, one that would require exposing skin. Her jaw tightened. "You've handled worse? This is nothing." Still, something about the way he looked at her, not with lust or pity, but with focused care, made her throat tighten. "Fine," she muttered, but no comments. He grinned faintly, reaching for his supplies. Not a word. The cloth met her skin, and she flinched. The wound along her inner thigh was deeper than it looked. The dried blood cracked and gave way as he worked, and heat flared behind her eyes, not from pain, but from embarrassment. He was focused, completely, not a single wandering glance, no smirk, no joke, just care, and somehow that was worse. "You're quiet," he said softly. "Most people scream when I do this." "Knights are trained to endure pain," she muttered, eyes fixed on the fireplace. "Screaming's for civilians." "Ah, so you suffer in silence, bravely?" "A beat. Heroically." She shot him a look. He grinned. "Sorry, you just have a very noble grimace." Despite herself, she let out a low breath that almost resembled a laugh, the smallest crack. He dipped the needle in alcohol, then threaded it with steady hands. "All right, this is the part where you hate me." The first puncture was sharp, controlled. Her muscles tensed, but she didn't move. He worked with efficiency, stitching the torn skin back together with hands that didn't shake. The room fell quiet again, save for the fire's soft crackle and the occasional scratch of thread through flesh. Saloon's thoughts wandered. She hated the stillness, hated the way her body felt foreign under someone else's hands, but there was something grounding in his presence. This man with no uniform, no title, no obligations. Just him and the simple rhythm of stitching skin and breathing air. No battle, no orders, no crown, just a cabin in the woods and someone who didn't ask her to be anything but alive. She glanced at him again. His brow was furrowed in concentration, mouth set. Not unkind, just focused. There was a scar near his jaw and another smaller one just beneath his eye. Not born of training, born of survival. "You've done this before," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "Too many times. Animals, people, myself. Soldier?" He paused for half a second before replying. "Once." The needle pulled taut with the final stitch. He tied it off and leaned back, wiping his hands on a cloth. "There, you're not going to die today." Saloon exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. "Good," she said flatly. "That would have been embarrassing." "Extremely," he agreed. "Bleeding out on my rug? I'd never hear the end of it." She looked at him, eyes narrowing. "From who?" He tilted his head. "Mostly myself." Later, in the back room, Saloon stood beside a steaming wash basin. She stripped slowly, wincing as fabric peeled away from wounds. Every motion was stiff, mechanical. The water stung as she slipped into it. She managed most of the cleaning herself, but when she tried to scrub her back, pain shot through her shoulder. She dropped the cloth. A long pause. Then quietly, "Hey." It came out more vulnerable than she meant. The man stepped in a moment later, sleeves rolled, eyes respectful. "I can't reach." "All right," he said gently. "Just my hands, promise." He knelt beside her and picked up the cloth, dipping it again. His touch was slow, careful. He said nothing. She didn't look at him. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "No? You talk too much. You're sarcastic, but your hands are steady." A pause. "You're not what I expected either," he said near her ear. "I thought knights were supposed to be proud and noble, unbreakable." "I am," she replied. "That's why you're letting me wash your hair, I assume?" She glared. "Don't push it." The man gave a short laugh, rising to his feet and wringing the water from the cloth. "No promises, but I'll go start dinner." Saloon said nothing as he stepped out and pulled the door softly shut behind him. She lingered in the bath a while longer. When she finally rose, she reached for the bundle of clean linen, only to pause. There was a dress folded neatly atop it, simple, modest, but undeniably pretty. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, quietly, slowly, she slipped it on. When she stepped back into the hearth room, he looked up from the stew pot and froze. Only for a second, but she noticed. She kept her shoulders square, chin high, defensive, out of habit. "This wasn't in the pile earlier," she said, avoiding his eyes. He cleared his throat and stirred the pot a little too deliberately. "Wasn't sure it would fit. I made it to sell in town. Thought maybe..." A shrug. "Figured you'd want something that didn't smell like blood and pine bark." Saloon raised an eyebrow. "So you make dresses now?" "Don't act surprised. I'm full of secrets." A beat. "And what happens when someone comes to buy it?" He glanced at her over his shoulder, smiling faintly. "They'll just have to wait until I make another one." She didn't thank him, not with words, but her hands lingered at the fabric for a moment as she sat down, adjusting, smoothing, unfamiliar with the way it felt against her skin. She didn't wear dresses, but she didn't take it off either. The scent of food had filled the cabin. The man stood near the fire, ladling something thick and steaming from a blackened pot into 2 wooden bowls. "Venison stew," he said. "Couldn't find any dragon meat, so you'll have to settle." Saloon eased down onto the bench beside the fire, careful not to strain her stitches. Her body ached in quiet pulses, but there was a strange comfort in the pain, proof that she was alive. She took the offered bowl with a nod. "Disappointing," she muttered. He smirked as he handed her a spoon. "That's what I keep hearing." The stew was rich, earthy, peppered with herbs and small diced roots. Saloon ate slowly, but without hesitation. It had been days since she'd had anything warm. She didn't realize how much she missed it. They ate in silence for several minutes. The fire crackled softly. Outside, wind stirred through the trees. There was no pretense here, no grand decor, no silver goblets or carved oak chairs, just wood, warmth, and food made by hand. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, it settled something inside her. She glanced up at him briefly, just once, and caught him watching her. Not with amusement, not with desire, with a kind of quiet reverence, like he didn't know what to make of her but couldn't look away. "You're staring again," she said. "Am I?" "Yes." He shrugged and reached for the bottle sitting near the hearth. Homemade wine, berries, and boredom. He poured 2 cups and passed one to her. Their fingers brushed, and she ignored the way her skin flinched. Not from pain, but memory. The first sip burned slightly on the way down, sweet but strong. She coughed lightly. "Gods, what is this?" "You taste regret. I taste hints of wild plum and survival instinct." She narrowed her eyes at him, but she drank again, slower this time. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was settled, the kind of quiet shared between people who have no reason to fill the space. He didn't know her story, didn't know why someone like her was out here alone, broken and bleeding. But he saw it now, behind the armor and cold eyes. She was holding herself together with whatever scraps she had left. There was something deeply, achingly human about her. Like a ruin with the roof still standing, like someone who forgot they were allowed to want peace, and he couldn't stop looking. "You're still staring. Just wondering how much wine it'll take before you tell me your name." A long pause, then, "Saloon." She said it like it didn't matter, but he smiled like it did. He took another sip of wine, watching her across the fire. "Not a name you hear often. Sounds important." Saloon didn't reply, just stared into the flames. "You said you're a knight," he went on, voice quieter now, "but you don't talk like one, not the ones I met, anyway." She gave him a sidelong glance, but said nothing. "You've got that look, like someone who's carried too much for too long." A long pause. "You weren't sent here on some border patrol, were you?" Her eyes flicked toward him. He could feel the warning in her silence. He smiled and raised his cup. "To surprises." Saloon didn't answer. She just lifted her cup and drank, quiet, thoughtful, and beside her, he didn't ask anything else. He just stayed. Chapter 3. Ash and Smoke. The wine warmed her chest, softening the edges of her thoughts. Saloon leaned back on the bench, eyes half-lidded, the flickering firelight dancing across her face. The man hadn't spoken again since she told him her name. He just watched the flames, his expression unreadable, quiet, content. Eventually, he stood, stretching his arms overhead with a groan. "Come on," he said. "You've seen enough of my walls. Time for something better." Saloon arched a brow. "Better than wine and venison stew?" "Much better." He reached out his hand, not demanding, just waiting. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she took it. His fingers were rough and calloused, but his grip was steady. He helped her to her feet, his touch lingering just a second longer than necessary. "Where are we going?" she asked, already annoyed at how breathless she sounded. He smiled, that same infuriating, impossible smile. "You'll see." They walked in silence for a while, their boots crunching lightly over pine needles and moss. The trees thinned just enough for golden light to spill through, catching dust motes in the air like drifting fireflies. As they neared a small clearing, the man reached down, casual, almost lazy, and plucked a wildflower from the edge of the path. Lavender petals, white center, just one. He twirled it once between his fingers, then tucked it into his coat pocket without a word. Saloon noticed, but said nothing. Just kept walking. The clearing opened wide, ringed with swaying grass and wildflowers kissed in gold. The sun drooped low on the horizon, threading fire through the tops of the trees. The man laid a linen sheet down without ceremony, setting wine beside it. Then he sat and looked up, letting the silence stretch like silk between them. Saloon stood for a long moment, arms folded across her chest. Then, slowly, she sat beside him. The breeze lifted strands of her silver hair. The dress she wore, his dress, fluttered slightly at the knees. They didn't speak, not until Saloon swirled the last of her wine in her cup. "You don't strike me as the type to pick flowers," she said, still watching the sky. He grinned faintly. "No? You seem more like the throw a rock at a tree and call it poetry type." A soft chuckle. "Usually, yeah." A pause, then quieter, more thoughtful. "But this one reminded me of someone. Hold still." Saloon blinked, then frowned. "Is this a joke?" "Not unless you think I'm funny." "Why?" He tilted his head slightly, gaze steady. Because it suits you. There was a flicker of hesitation, but then, with gentle care, he tucked the flower behind her ear. Saloon's expression turned almost defiant, like she was daring him to say something else. He didn't. He just looked at her, like someone quietly appreciating a work of art. A silence passed between them, soft and golden. "I never asked your name," Saloon said. "Artie," he replied. "Just Artie? Short for Artemis, but don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation for being mysterious." She huffed a laugh. The moment lingered. The sunset deepened, and her eyes lingered on his face a moment longer than they should. The sun dipped lower. The clouds above were painted in molten gold and smoldering purple. The world glowed like someone had spilled fire across the sky. Saloon's gaze rose with it. Her lips parted just slightly, her eyes wide, not with fear, but something softer, like wonder or maybe longing. Artie didn't look at the sky. He looked at her, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. The light caught her profile in just the right way. Warm gold brushed across her cheekbones, softened the angle of her jaw. Her silver hair glowed like threads of moonlight, woven into the air itself, and that little wild flower behind her ear somehow made her seem even more out of place. Not less dangerous, but impossibly human. She had that same unshakable posture, like she was always ready for battle, even here, even now. But her shoulders had lowered, just barely. Her eyes weren't sharp. They weren't scanning the horizon for threats. They were open, softened by the sunset and the wine and the quiet. She looked like someone who forgot what it felt like to be alive, and he realized he'd never seen anyone try so hard not to feel something beautiful. That's when she spoke. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Not to him, not about him, just out loud, like she wasn't used to saying it. Artie didn't look away. "It is beautiful," he said softly, but he wasn't talking about the sky. The sun had nearly vanished now, leaving behind a sky streaked in dusky rose and deepening blue. Stars pressed their way through the veil, hesitant and cold. Saloon shifted slightly, drawing her knees up and resting her arms over them. Her wine cup was empty, but she held it anyway, something to keep her hands busy. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "There were 5 of us." Artie said nothing, just waited. "We were the last party the Crown sent after the dragon. They'd lost 2 others before us, said we were the best." A hollow laugh escaped her. "Said we'd come back heroes?" She paused, as if sorting through the words before letting them go. "We did kill it." Her voice was level, tired. "But it wasn't a victory, it was an ending. By the time the beast fell, I was the only one left." The breeze shifted. Somewhere, a nightbird called. "I don't remember the last few blows, just the smoke, the heat, their voices, fading." Her fingers tightened around the empty cup. "I walked for 3 days after. Didn't eat, barely slept. My body just kept moving, until it didn't." She finally looked at him. "That's when you found me?" Artie's eyes didn't leave hers. "They'll put your name in some story," he said softly. "Polish it, make it easier to swallow." Saloon scoffed. "The king will take the credit. The bards will spin some heroic tale. The truth doesn't matter." His jaw tightened. He stared into the darkening woods like he was seeing something far away. "It never does, not to them." He set his cup down slowly. "That's all kings know how to do. Bang their soldiers together like toys and pretend the winner earned something." Saloon didn't answer. She just looked down at the linen between them, silent. Then, quietly, "I'm not supposed to enjoy things like this." It wasn't bitter, just resigned, like she was admitting something she hated knowing. "It's not part of the job. I don't get to sit around on soft grass and drink bad wine and watch the sunset." A pause. "That's not for people like me." Artie studied her for a long moment, then leaned back, arms resting loosely on his knees. "Anyone can enjoy things if they let themselves," he said. "It just depends on the cost. Responsibility, duty, they take up space. Sometimes enjoying something means letting go of control for a moment." He looked at her, dead on. "And yeah, that might mean letting someone down, or not being perfect, but no one is. The best you can do is find your balance." Saloon didn't answer, but something shifted in her face, like maybe, just for tonight, she was going to let herself believe him. Pop! The sky bloomed in gold. Saloon's head jerked up, eyes narrowing. Another firework burst above the trees, blue this time, then red. She blinked slowly, watching them fade into soft trails of smoke. "Fireworks?" she said, as if the word itself didn't quite make sense. The man beside her, Artie, didn't look surprised, just leaned back on his palms, watching the show. "You've been out of the mountains a few days," he said. "Words probably spread?" Another burst, a cascade of shimmering violet and white like stars tearing through the sky. Saloon stared, her voice dropped. "They're for me?" "You killed a dragon," he said. "The people might not know your name yet, but they know someone gave everything to stop it." Saloon scoffed, shaking her head. "They'll say it was the king's strategy, that the crown made it possible, not us." "Let them." Artie's voice was low but firm. "Let them write their speeches. You still did it." She didn't look away from the sky. "I didn't do it alone." Her voice cracked slightly. "I lost them, every one of them. And you came back." A pause. "Only barely." He glanced at her, saw the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers clenched in the fabric of her dress. "You think survival makes you unworthy?" Saloon didn't answer. The fireworks continued above, each one louder now, grander, as if the world was trying to make her see it. "You hate that they're celebrating you," he said. Her head turned sharply. "They don't even know who I am." "Doesn't matter." Another firework burst. "You made the world safer. That's worth celebrating, whether or not you think you deserve it." She didn't reply. Her breath caught slightly, barely audible. Then, "Feels wrong?" "Why?" "Because I'm here, and they're not." Artie didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Maybe that's exactly why you have to let yourself feel it." He looked at her, really looked. "Let yourself be here, alive for them." The next firework burst, brighter than the others, cast her face in pale light, just long enough for Artie to see the shimmer in her eyes that wasn't from the sky. She didn't cry, but she looked like she could have. She swallowed hard and looked down at her hands again. The wine cup was still there, but untouched now. Then, without a word, she shifted slightly on the linen, just enough for her arm to brush against his. Not entirely by accident, Artie didn't move. He didn't need to. He just stayed there beside her, shoulder to shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth between them, but not close enough to crowd it. And for the first time in years, Saloon let herself sit still, let herself be seen, let herself be alive, even if only for tonight. Pop! Another firework cracked the air, high and white, fading slowly into falling sparks. Saloon's eyes followed it up, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. She stared upward, mouth parted slightly, the light dancing across her face. Then, quietly, not quite a whisper, "Will they remember me?" Artie turned his head, watched her. The firelight in her silver hair, the tension in her shoulders trying to hold everything in. "Even if they don't," he said, "I will." She looked at him, really looked, and something cracked, not loud, not obvious, just a breath she didn't realize she was holding. And then she kissed him, not hesitantly, not clumsily, just suddenly, like a decision made in the space between heartbeats, like she was tired of holding back. Artie froze for a moment, surprised, then kissed her back. His hand found the side of her face, warm and steady. He didn't pull her in, didn't press. He just let her stay there as long as she needed. When she finally pulled away, she looked away quickly. Her ears were pink. The blush had crept up her throat like a secret, and her eyes, they didn't rise. She couldn't look at him, because for the first time in her life, she was afraid, not of a blade, not of death, not of dragons or kings or anything she'd ever been trained to kill, but him. Artie, he scared her, because he saw her and still stayed. Her voice, when it came, was low, tight. "I hate you." He didn't move. She kept going, each word hitting like a shield she didn't want to carry anymore. "I hate how all of this makes me feel. I hate your kind eyes, your steady hands, your quiet voice that always sounds like it's about to laugh. And I hate your stupid smile that makes me want to stay." She finally looked at him. A breath, a pause. "I love you." Another firework popped in the sky, low and slow. They sat in silence for a few heartbeats. Then Artie spoke again, quieter. "We don't have to go inside." Saloon glanced at him. "But if we do," he added, "I can light the fire, make tea, or..." He paused. "You can just sit beside me until the sun comes up." A long silence, then, softly, let's go inside. Back in the cabin, the air was warm and dim, lit only by the slow flicker of the hearth. Saloon stood near the window, arms crossed loosely as she watched the fading trails of smoke outside. Her silhouette glowed in firelight, silver hair tousled, dress soft against her frame, posture still proud, but no longer guarded. She felt him approach before she heard him. His voice came near her ear, barely above a whisper. "You've faced dragons." There was a smile in it, small. "But this scares you." It wasn't a question. She stiffened slightly, not from offense, but from how true it felt. She turned her head part way, but not enough to meet his eyes. She began, then hesitated. "Not scared?" But her voice betrayed her. Artie didn't laugh, didn't press. He simply reached up and brushed a lock of silver hair behind her ear, his fingers light against her skin. "It's all right." The moment held. Saloon didn't pull away. She just stood there, still, caught somewhere between caution and surrender. Her hand rose slowly and pressed to his chest, not to stop him, just to feel the steady thump of his heart beneath her palm. It grounded her. Artie looked at her, really looked, and smiled gently. "You're still scared." This time, she didn't deny it. Her voice came quieter. "I don't know how to do this." He tilted his head, his brow faintly creased. "Do what?" Her fingers curled slightly in the fabric of his shirt. "Be close like this." A breath. "I've never..." His gaze softened. The realization wasn't met with surprise, but reverence. He didn't tease, he didn't flinch, just nodded. "Okay." But then, because he couldn't help himself, he added, just a flicker of warmth in his voice, "Slaying dragons, and this is what finally makes you nervous?" Saloon rolled her eyes, but the blush hit her cheeks fast and hot. "Shut up." His grin widened slightly. "If I were a dragon, I'd be terrified of you." She huffed, still flushed from his teasing. "You are nothing like a dragon." Artie tilted his head, eyes trailing the curve of her jaw. "No," he said, stepping a little closer, "because loving you feels like trying to tame one." Saloon turned to face him fully now, eyes narrowed, not with anger, but heat. "Tame?" she echoed, incredulous. "You don't tame dragons." He smiled. "Exactly." A breath passed between them. Then Saloon's gaze dropped briefly to his chest, where her hand still rested. When she looked back up, there was something sharper in her eyes, softer too. "If I'm the dragon," she said quietly, "you're the fool who wandered into the cave without armor." Artie didn't move, didn't blink. "Maybe," he murmured, "but you didn't burn me." A pause. Then, finally, she smiled, just a little, and kissed him. Not softly this time, not cautiously. It was a decision, a breathless surrender. Her arms slid around his shoulders as his found the small of her back, pulling her into the warmth of him, the steady thrum of something she hadn't let herself feel in years. His lips parted against hers, slow, measured, but when her fingers fumbled at the hem of his shirt, he stilled her just for a second. "We'll go slow," he murmured against her mouth. "Only what you want." Saloon leaned her forehead to his. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you." That was all he needed. He kissed her again, deeper this time, until the world shrank to just heat and fingertips and the low crackle of the fire. Clothes slipped away in silence. No armor, no titles, just skin, breath, and the impossible closeness of being seen and still held. As they moved toward the bed, her hand found his, and she spoke. "Artie?" He looked into her eyes, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Yeah?" A pause. "Don't let me ruin this." He stepped close, resting his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. "You couldn't ruin this if you tried." She smiled, small, unguarded, the kind of smile she didn't know she still had. And together they disappeared into linen and warmth and the quiet exhale of everything they'd both carried for far too long. Chapter 4, Ash and Morning. The air felt colder than it should have. Morning crept in, slow and pale, light spilling across the wooden floor in soft, colorless streaks. The fire had long since burned down to embers. The warmth from the night before, soft linen, shared breath, skin against skin, was gone. Artie stirred beneath the blanket in the loft, reaching instinctively toward her, but his hand touched only empty sheets. He blinked, sat up slowly, and then he saw. The other side of the bed was smooth, tucked, unrumpled, except for where she'd sat before slipping out, like she'd tried not to wake him, like she'd tried not to leave a trace. But she had. His eyes caught something near the hearth, on the low table where they'd shared stew and wine not long ago. He climbed down the ladder without thinking, bare feet on creaking wood. The cabin felt hollow in a way it hadn't before. Quiet, not with peace, but with absence. Folded neatly on the table, the paper weighed down by a single wildflower, lavender petals, white center, pressed flat but still whole. He stared at it for a long moment before reaching out. He touched it gently and unfolded it slowly. The paper had dried, but the damage was done. Tiny blotches where the ink had bled, not from careless writing, but from something she hadn't meant to leave behind. Artie, you told me the people are celebrating, that they're grateful, that someone out there still remembers what we did. I hadn't felt that in so long, like I mattered, like I was alive. You reminded me. You made me feel things I thought were lost forever. Laughter, want, hope. But you also reminded me that I still have something left to give. Not to the crown, not to the king, but to the people who can't fight their own dragons. I don't know if that makes me brave or foolish, maybe both. But I can't stay, not yet. Please don't think this night meant nothing. You were real. And I think, if I had met you at any other time, maybe we could have been something more. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not trying to tame me. Saloon. He stood there for a long time, fingers curled around the edges of the paper. The fire crackled low, the only sound left. Then he looked at the flower again. Faded purple, delicate white center, pressed flat, but still beautiful. Just like the moment it came from. Artie didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't move for a while, and then, finally, he exhaled. A long, steady breath, heavy with everything unsaid. He closed his eyes and whispered, I love you, Saloon. Even if she wasn't there to hear it, even if she never would be. He set the note back on the table, folded it carefully, smoothed the edges. Then he turned toward the hearth and started a new fire. Damn, it was cold today. It's been days, maybe weeks. The air hasn't warmed much. Outside, frost clung to the tips of the pines. The wind whispered through the branches, rattling them like bones. Inside, the fire crackled low, more out of habit than need. Artie sat at the table with his hands wrapped around a mug of tea, gone cold. He wasn't really drinking it. He'd tried to keep busy, chopped enough wood to last 2 winters, cleaned the stew pot 3 times, fixed a drawer that didn't need fixing, and yet every time he turned, every time he paused, his eyes found the easel by the window. The blank canvas had been sitting there for days, waiting. He didn't want to start it. He also couldn't stop thinking about it. With a sigh, Artie stood and crossed the room. He pulled the canvas forward, adjusting the angle slightly, then gathered his brushes and oils. The familiar ritual steadied his hands, even if it didn't quiet his heart. He stared at the canvas a long while before touching it, and then he began. Slow strokes, gentle lines. He didn't sketch her in armor, didn't paint her as the night the kingdom celebrated. There were no dragons, no swords, no fire in her eyes. Just her, the way she'd looked on that linen sheet under the fading light, silver hair drifting in the breeze, the soft curve of her shoulder where the dress had slipped, that wildflower tucked behind her ear, now long pressed and dried, but still vivid in his memory. He painted her as he saw her, not a legend, not a weapon, a woman, alive, afraid, beautiful. Hours passed, the fire burned low again, the light outside turned gray, then gold, then gray again. He stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. The painting wasn't finished, not truly. He could add more, tweak the shadows, soften the edges, but he wouldn't. Not this one. Artie looked at it for a long time, and then, for the first time in days, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was honest. Not because the ache had gone away, but because now it had a place to live. He turned and set the brushes down, poured fresh water into the wash basin, stirred the fire back to life, and for the first time since she left, he let her go. Chapter 5. Ash and Memory. The air smelled like charcoal and rain. Saloon stood in the ruins of the cabin, her boots crunching lightly over scorched timber. Smoke no longer rose from the blackened beams, but the memory of flame clung to everything. It soaked into the earth, into her lungs. She didn't speak, didn't move. The painting lay where she'd found it, partially burned, edges curled and blackened like old paper. Most of the canvas was untouched, preserved by luck or mercy, and in the center, her, not in armor, not a hero. Just her, in that soft blue dress, hair brushed over one shoulder, a flower behind her ear. Her hair, it caught what little light filtered through the broken roof, and for the first time, she understood the color Artie had chosen. Ashen, not gray, not silver, but ash, soft, fading like smoke after the fire had passed, the color of something that burned once, something still warm, even if the flame had moved on. Saloon stared at the painting, her jaw tight. Her eyes didn't shimmer, her lips didn't tremble. She wouldn't give it that. But her hand, calloused, steady, trained to never falter, lowered just enough to brush the edge of the canvas. And that's when she felt it. Not paint, not canvas, paper, tucked into the back where the frame had split from the heat, just barely visible. She eased it free, her fingers ghosting over the brittle corner. It was a pressed flower, dried, fragile, still clinging to hints of purple and white like a whisper refusing to be silenced. Her throat closed instantly. It was the same flower, the one he gave her, the one he tucked behind her ear, the one she left behind. She hadn't told him to keep it, hadn't even mentioned it when she slipped away that morning. But he had. He'd saved it, pressed it, preserved it. A fleeting moment preserved, like her love for him, and that's what broke her. Not the fire, not the death, not even the thought that he might be gone. It was this, the quiet way he remembered. Her fingers trembled, her vision blurred. She staggered back half a step, and then, all at once, her legs gave out. Her knees hit the scorched floorboards with a dull thud. Her breath punched out of her lungs. Her hands caught on blackened wood, and ash streaked her palms. No. She gritted her teeth, clenched her jaw, tried to breathe through it, through the sudden pressure in her chest, like something had come loose and shattered behind her ribs, but it was too late. The sob tore from her throat, raw and unexpected. And then another, and another, until she was no longer a knight, not a soldier, not a dragon slayer, not even Saloon, just a woman broken on the floor of a burned-down cabin, mourning the one man who ever truly saw her. Her shoulders shook with every breath, like her body was fighting to hold itself together and losing, finally, hopelessly losing. Garrett, the young soldier beside her, stood frozen in the doorway. He'd never seen her like this. No one had. He didn't speak, didn't move. And Saloon, she wept, violently, desperately. The sound muffled against the flower clutched to her chest. She didn't know how long she stayed like that. But when the tears slowed, when her body finally stilled, she wasn't empty. She was just quiet. Burned down, but not gone. Ash. The wind shifted through the broken beams, carrying the scent of ash and pine. Saloon's body had stilled, but the grief clung to her like smoke. She sat in the wreckage, wrapped around the flower, the memory, the ache, and stared at the place where fire had taken everything but that painting. Footsteps approached. She didn't look up. Garrett stood just a few paces away, silent. The younger soldier didn't speak, didn't ask, didn't pry. He just stood there, like a sentinel, like a friend. And then, softly, carefully, he knelt beside her. A beat passed, then another, and without a word, he extended his hand. Saloon stared at it for a long moment. Her pride recoiled on instinct, but pride had cost her too much already. So, slowly, with fingers still smudged in ash, she reached out and let someone help her. Garrett helped her to her feet, steady and patient. He didn't look her in the eye, didn't try to offer comfort, just gave her space to stand and silence to hold herself together again. Saloon didn't speak as she turned back to the painting. She gently tucked the flower back behind the frame, then reached for a corner of her cloak and wiped the soot from her hands. Her face was still streaked from tears. Her eyes were red, but her posture, her spine, was straight again. "Let's go," she said quietly. Garrett gave a single nod. As they stepped outside, the wind caught the edges of her cloak. Her silver hair fluttered behind her, ashen like smoke before dawn. The cold morning sun stretched across the clearing. Light spilled through the trees, painting the grass in gold. Saloon didn't look back, not at the cabin, not at the painting, not at the past. She just walked. And as she did, ash fell quietly from her shoulders, drifting into the wind where the fire had once been. The end. Epilogue. Ash and Pine. The patrol had been routine, border sweep, southern ridge, quiet, uneventful, the kind Saloon liked. She didn't expect to pass that way again, didn't expect to see anything until the smoke. Not thick like a new fire, faint, wispy, rising in gentle spirals from a place that should have been nothing but ash. Her horse slowed on its own, her hand tightened on the reins. The last time she'd seen this clearing, it was blackened earth and memories, a graveyard of everything she didn't want to admit had mattered. But now, a roof, a porch, smoke curling from a stone chimney, her heart stopped. No, it wasn't possible. She'd seen the body, the fire, the wreckage. She kicked the horse forward, fast, reckless. The clearing opened, trees falling away like curtains torn aside, and there it was, the cabin, newer, smaller, but undeniably his. Saloon leapt from the saddle before the horse had stopped. Her boots hit the dirt, and she ran, faster than she had in years, armorless, breathless, like something in her was about to split in two. The front door creaked open, and he stepped outside. Artista. Alive, older maybe, a little thinner, a faint scar she didn't remember, traced just above his brow, but it was him. It was him. Saloon didn't speak, didn't breathe. She just sprinted. Wait was all Artie had time to say before she slammed into him at full speed. Her arms wrapped tight around his neck as the impact knocked them both to the ground. They hit the grass hard, tangled in limbs and gasping breath and stunned silence. Then, Saloon froze, hands fisted in his shirt, cheek pressed against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, real, steady, alive. Her breath caught, stuttered, and then it all hit her. A low, shuddering sob burst from her chest, raw and sudden, like something cracked open from the inside. She clung to him like he might vanish if she let go, her whole body trembling with the weight of it all. I thought, she choked, I thought you were gone. I buried you. I saw the flames. I saw the body. Her voice broke completely. I thought I lost you. She pressed her face against his collarbone, shoulders shaking as tears finally came. Not graceful, not quiet, just everything she'd held in, crashing down all at once. Artie didn't move, didn't interrupt. He just held her. Arms wrapped firm around her back, one hand rising slowly to cradle the back of her head, his fingers threaded into her silver hair, softer than he remembered, ashen like smoke before dawn. I'm here, he whispered, over and over again. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. It took a long time before her breathing slowed, before her sobs quieted into shaky exhales. She didn't lift her head, didn't want to, because for the first time since she left, she wasn't alone. Eventually, she sat up slightly, still straddling him, still clinging as if he were a dream. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse. You're alive. I am, he said softly. And you found me. You rebuilt the cabin. I had time, he said, and something to hold on to. She didn't smile, not yet. Her fingers brushed his chest like she couldn't quite believe it was solid. What happened? He exhaled slowly. I got jumped. Bandits, or maybe a cult. They came at night. I got one of them, but the others torched the place. I ran, hid in the forest, figured they'd think I burned with it. She closed her eyes. The body must have been one of them. Saloon trembled again, not from cold, from relief she didn't know what to do with. She finally climbed off of him, helping pull him to his feet. They stood there in the quiet, breathing in the scent of pine and smoke. Then she asked, You still have it? Artie didn't need to ask what she meant. He stepped inside the cabin and returned with a small wooden box. Inside, between two panes of glass, was the wildflower, faded, pressed, delicate, but whole. Saloon stared at it like it was the only thing in the world still real. Silence, then she laughed. A real laugh, free and wild and alive. She leaned in again, forehead to his, breath warming the space between them. "I'm not leaving again." Artie's voice caught for a second in his throat, then quietly, just loud enough for her to hear it, "I love you." She let out another laugh, this time mixed with tears of quiet sobbing. "I know," she said, and then after a moment, she finally let herself free. "I love you too." Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you thought. If you like my way of storytelling, please subscribe to my channel. I'll be writing and uploading more stories soon. Thank you very much.